And hello and welcome to another conversation that we're going to have about the 10100. This crazy, wonderful idea that we have where we get 10 entrepreneurially minded yahoos together and about 100 of their friends total. And we will then coalesce around 10 business ideas with 100 members where we are going to start up sequentially each business one by one and hopefully make a difference in our lives and the lives of everybody else around us. Oh, hey, look, we got more people who want to join us. Hot damn.
Yay!
If I can just figure out which window is the window. It's Sarah!
Hi, Sarah.
And so now the 45-minute thing begins, so which is nice. It'll compartmentalize everything excellent to frame our conversation. Oh, I wonder if Lauren is available to join our conversation, because I'd love to get her in on this idea as well. Lauren.
Yay!
Here we are. You know Lauren, don't you?
Yes, I do.
Excellent.
Wait a second here. Soldering guns to turn on. Hello, hello.
Hey, Sarah!
Not too bad, yourself?
It's good. Can you hear me okay?
You sound like you're in an aquarium.
Yeah, I'm getting that my internet connection is unstable.
I can see that. On the other hand, we can just make believe that you're maybe in the Mars colony, and this will all appear to be a lot more futuristic than it really is. I often like to think that we...
I'm really exciting actually. I can do that. I will,
Oh boy, we got Lauren joining too. Hey, excellent.
Yay!
This is going to be one of the larger conversations we've had in a while. So we'll just wait for everybody to come in, and we'll do the weekly recap, where I try to go into my little elevator spiel about what the 10100 is. But welcome to the budding metropolis of Owen Sound, located snugly in the butt of the elephant in northern southwestern Ontario. Joining us today, we've got Laura, Sarah, and Lauren, as well as myself, James. And we're all glad to see you guys. How is everybody doing?
Good.
Good times.
Pretty good.
Oh yes, and Sarah Goldman is currently on Mars. We've come to the conclusion.
Oh, lucky girl. Come on, you did free, I assume.
internet.
Can't hear.
Get the internet. I'm listening today.
Oh,
Lauren, can you hear me okay? Now we're getting...
Sorry, I'm just getting things worked out here.
That's quite alright. I've been... it was fun running into you there the other night on the street. And if I had had more wherewithal, I would have mentioned that... asked you if you'd ever thought about putting on rooftop gardens as part of the idea.
I'm sorry, I'm just still getting Hi, I'm here now. I'm still getting the volume to work.
Okay. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, but you were saying something. I bumped into you.
Yes.
Okay.
And I was going to ask you if I'd had the wherewithal in the moment. I would have asked you if you'd had any thoughts about putting rooftop gardens on places like downtown buildings and such.
that is such a good
yeah.
idea.
Yeah, I think my original thought is sort of broadened, I guess. What my intention is to just promote as much urban agriculture as possible.
Mm.
So any sort of services that we can provide that are going to get more people growing, more people interested, and more space being used more efficiently. I don't know if that makes
So would it be?
sense. It doesn't necessarily look like a rooftop garden specifically.
Mhm.
But say there's like tiered services. So someone that lives in an apartment can still learn how to garden, can still have a bit of fresh produce.
Mhm.
If maybe we have a kit that helps them get started. That would come with some instructional video. But if somebody has a yard and they want to have a garden box in there, they don't know where to start, they need to expand their garden, they already know what they're doing. Like, there's so many different services that could be provided in the scope of urban agriculture that meets every interest level, every skill set, as well as every space.
I'm even thinking about that idea of like, because if our goal is to get as many of these window boxes and balconies and windows as possible, we can remove the price impedance by working out sort of like a lease agreement with people, where the T100 would sort of front up the cash required in order to build the boxes, and then we would just have like a monthly ongoing sort of the people who are hosting the place, would they pay like a certain amount for the equipment? So instead of having to pay like $200 up front for box equipment, they would pay like a 3-year contract with $20 a month sort of thing.
Right.
Off the top of my head. I don't know what that would work out to, but it would probably be enough to cover our costs for being able to justify fronting the money to build stuff. And then we'd have a whole bunch of houses that would have produce that we would then be working with both the people growing it to provide food for them, but also then to put out to local grocers and things like that, right? Am I capturing it?
Yeah, definitely. I should clarify that I'm kind of coming at this from a social entrepreneurship angle, right? So sorry, never mind. I think that I've sort of lost my train of thought. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I like the idea of
Talking about social entrepreneurship.
Yeah. So I'm trying to I think frame a mission for myself, for my own work, because I want this to benefit the most vulnerable. Right? So my instinct doesn't always go towards let's market this to, say, people who can afford to go for dinner. Like, that's just not where my mindset all goes right away.
Yep.
Like, so for example, what I was going to suggest tonight, what I plan to suggest was, what about starting to talk with developers, like, you know, what or someone that wants to develop that park, right? And so this has got me thinking about land use and what is just sitting vacant, for example, and what is the harm in sort of, like, if you're not going to be using it, at least let us carbon capture, right? Like, grow a better ground cover on it, keep the soil from eroding. But perhaps, like, if there's some of these areas that don't have any intended use in the short term, perhaps they can donate that space temporarily, and it is an opportunity for them to donate land to grow food for the food bank.
Okay.
And so like, say, half of it could be donated and half of it would be to keep the operation of that going.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, it would need to be like a fair wage, right, for the people that are doing that work. But it might be another way to sort of get people to leverage land resources.
So,
right?
Let me recap that to make sure that I've captured the idea. So the idea is that we have land developers that have vacant land that is just sitting there, not being used right at the moment. And that instead of it just being sitting there, not being used, we can work with those land developers to cultivate that land to create produce. And then you talked about them donating the land. I doubt developers would donate land to us, but
no.
they might they might allow us to use their land, which I'm sure would be great publicity for them. It's their way of it's a photo op for them. We can work out a deal with them in order for them to be recompensed, maybe cover the taxes on that property, and at least it's making money for them in the meantime. That sort of idea. And
it would totally depend on the space. Like I'm just starting to look around at, say, my neighborhood and try to reimagine what some of these spots could look like. So there's an image that came up on Facebook the other day of someone has planted every single boulevard with wildflowers. And just think of how that could change the environment. Like you're attracting pollinators, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's necessary. It adds so much visual stimulation to a neighborhood. It makes the space more livable and enjoyable. And I just want to start thinking, like, why are we doing the things we're doing? And is there an option to do it better? And I think it's going to evolve conversations, say, with this Barry fellow who has a lot of properties just sitting there. From what I understand, it's not being worked on. And I picture, like, I live right beside, or at least where I am right now is near 3rd Ave West, where there's that big abandoned square.
Oh, yes, the old, where the old factory used to be.
Oh, brownfields. The thing with that land is it used to be a factory and the ground's toxic.
Well,
so that's going to be something that you have to do.
No, I know, but so here's what I see going on. They've left a wild patch in the middle, which is fantastic. There's a little bit of an island there for an ecosystem, right? They mow the rest of it. Why? Like, I mean, save gas, right? And not mow that, but add some flowers to it. There's a group in Collingwood that goes around digging up pavement in order to regenerate the area. Just like get some soil on there, get some green in there, right, to capture carbon, to make more oxygen. Like it cools down the climate around it, right? The micro environment. Yeah. I mean, I could go on at length, but just anywhere where there's like land not being efficiently used, I think we can use this as an opportunity.
Yeah, totally. Using flora to. I'm trying to make notes right at the moment. Is anybody a good note taker? I threw the link for the notes in the chat box, so anybody can add to it. So far I got talk to developers, break vacant land to be used for growing produce, and then now we got talk to owners or the city, which may be interesting as well. Because the last I heard, the people who owned the old Black Clausen Kennedy site, which is where that entire 3rd Ave West block is. Is it 3rd Ave? 2nd Ave. It's between 1st and 2nd there.
Between 3rd and... Yeah, between 3rd and 2nd.
It'll be 1st and 2nd. The big one?
Yeah, it would be because it goes out.
Yeah, so, because either way, wherever it is, the last I heard, it was owned by people either in the Netherlands or somewhere in Europe, and that they were just kind of sitting on it in anticipation of developing it one day, maybe, sort of, or possibly using it as a tax haven, write-off something. I do not know. My imagination is running away with me. This could all just be, it just could all just be fodder for a fictional book that I might work on later, now that I think about it. Back to the point. We'd probably be further ahead with talking to people down at the city. I bet you Anne probably has her ear to the ground on who would be the best person to talk to about that old site. Because I remember a couple of years ago they got into a bit of trouble because they weren't doing anything in terms of lawn care in the area. They just let it grow wild. And wildlife was returning, and of course we can't have that. So it'd be interesting if we could do something. It'd be really interesting if we could also, at the same time we're growing it, we could also detoxify the soil. Because I know that there are different plants and stuff out there that... and different biological organisms that we could even introduce that would break down like the near centuries worth of diesel or just fossil fuels, that oils that just must be all over that place, you know?
Yeah. No, 100% agree.
Where like there were stories where they're just like, don't even walk on the grass; it'll shorten your lifespan. Blah blah blah. Like. That's why it's deadly, you know.
Well, there's someone in there mowing the lawn, though.
Crap. Yeah, exactly. It's not that bad, but, you know.
One other thing, with what you mentioned there, James, about cleaning up that soil.
Mm-hmm.
So another idea that's sort of tossing around is compost, because it's been talked about in the Climate Action Team.
Yep.
It's been discussed with there was some meeting with the county. Oh no, they're taking ideas. Currently, the counties are taking ideas to address climate action.
Mm-hmm.
And waste management being one part of that. I think though that, like, I almost don't want to leave that the compost piece to the municipality, for them to contract off to someone
right.
Our compost, like, see it as a resource, really, right? That,
what if we were the people they contracted to, though?
Well, yes, yeah, exactly. So, do we, like, I don't know if that's a top-down thing or a bottom-up thing, then, right? Like, do we go ahead and just start it on our own, or do we wait for the city to say, okay, we're gonna do this, we've okayed it, and now we're going to take our submissions for a proposal, right?
I would imagine if we... How can we do this? Because, like, our end goal is to create compost that we could then use to grow food. I'm presuming. Which would be a boon for us because we want to open a business where we grow food, which is great for us. Also, having the city currently doesn't have a program that collects compost. We don't have grass collecting. We don't have anything like that. Some cities do, and it would be interesting if we could then offer that as a service to the city for something that won't...
A point of order of that, though, is apparently they were collecting compost because they figured, it's greener and everything to separate everything.
Mm-hmm.
But apparently, and like inevitably, we do want to get as little into the landfills as possible. But things that don't biodegrade very fast biodegrade even slower when there's no organic matter to help it along. So.
Oh, we lost you, Laura.
Your ends of tree landfills in the long run. So until they get rid of the land, I wouldn't necessarily want to abolish or like make a composting system necessarily. That's just a
Sorry, Laura, you cut off completely there for me for a little bit. Can I just insert something into that? So I think what I heard you, Laura, say was that there was an issue with there being too much organic, like household matter.
No, landfills have an issue of like the less organic matter there is in a landfill, the slower things that are slow to biodegrade work along. Like they kind of need something to sort of get them going. So there are chunks of landfill where nobody was putting in any organic matter that are biodegrading slower. So by adding, things like ends of lettuce and stuff to the garbage, it's actually speeds up the biodegradation of other things that are slow to biodegrade. So it's actually kind of a good thing. As long as there are landfills, it's actually a good thing to put compost into it.
Okay. But even that having been said, we do have an idea where we want compost because it's going to help us grow things.
Yeah.
So
I just collect compost. I just mean that, like, if we collect too much compost from the city, that means that wherever the garbage is going is going to have less compost, and that's not very good for the environment, and it's undermining our intentions entirely. So.
Agree 100%. So this is how I thought it could work initially. If we're just to say go ahead, do it, start getting some compost together. Imagine just like having a neighborhood, one neighborhood, get together and have this compost collectively that they can use next year.
Yep. So
the way I could see that sort of spreading, branching out is like an adopt a butt can with wastewaters.
Okay. Yeah.
So they have these cans that you agree to take care of. You collect the cigarette butts from them. They get recycled somewhere south of us and get made into pellets for 3D printing. Anyways, that could sort of be like the system for composting, where someone adopts a composter for their neighborhood or for a group of people that they've invited, let them know about it, and then we have sites where we pick up.
Yeah, I could see us doing that.
Like a network that can grow.
Yeah, like being able to create an opt-in network of people who say, yes, we want to donate our compost, and even then put up posters all around Owen Sound, all around Wyerton, all around different places, and then within our 10100 network, we enlist people to go around and do the collections, once a week or so, or once a month, or whatever it is, and then we start collecting compost, and the people who do the collections will get paid to do the collections, and we'll have it.
So I've also looked at the type of equipment that we need, depending on how much biomass we have. Like the sort of starting ones, I think they said. Shoot, I'd have to look at the volume that they take weekly again, but like the specs are really interesting. Like it helps trap so much of the methane. It's reducing the smell, so you essentially get this odorless compost at the end. But it looks like a tank, and you sort of load it in, and then you can shovel it out when it's ready, and it turns everything for you. So I think it's telling you what to put in at what time as well, because you have to layer your green and your brown, right? So the carbon and nitrogen. If you have too much nitrogen, you know how if you've got tons of grass clippings, it can almost start to burn. So you've got to keep that aerated and turning. Yeah.
Oh man, I'm so glad we got people who know what they're doing.
Yeah. Well, I feel like that could have so much impact in the community.
Agreed. You know, and it gives people a chance. And I was also thinking, like, the thought I just had right there was wondering if we could, because I've been focusing on building a worker-owned network of cooperatives, cooperative businesses, which is great for the worker. You know, it's a democratic workplace. You get to elect your managers, and if your manager is running the business into the ground, you get to elect somebody who won't. And with our 10100, we've got the backing of, we've got a way of growing the capital. We've got a way of making sure that if times are tight, there's always some liquid cash to pump back into the system to keep things moving until we can get customers, until we can sell stuff, until we can, you know, turn a surplus or turn a profit. But then I thought, like, as you talk about social enterprises, which of course it involves not just shareholders, but stakeholders, people who have a stake in what we are providing for them. And I think, wouldn't it be interesting as if, in addition to being able to be members of the 10100 in terms of labor members, people who are there to work in one of the businesses, we could also create it's like a consumer cooperative where people who aren't necessarily labor members of the 10100, they don't get a vote in the business, they don't get a cut of the dividend shares, but what they can do, and this is how like Mountain Equipment Co-op works, where you become a member of that store. And then depending on how much you buy, you get a little bit of the cut of the whole of the dividend sort of thing. We could operate the agribusiness, which we still need to come up with an idea for. You had a really brilliant one that wasn't Give Peas a Chance, was it? No, it was something else.
Oh, no. I think we were just making puns at that point.
Oh, and it was brilliant. Anyway, the point of the matter is, if we could allow people to buy memberships or to become members of that particular part of the 10100, the agribusiness, so that they could participate in how the produce, what the produce produces in terms of what it brings in, and then we could have like the lion's share go back into the 10100 like it would if it was a standalone business, and then the rest could be split between the members who are helping us grow the food by either hosting boxes or hosting sites, garden sites where we're growing the food. And then we could take that exact same membership. So if you're a member of the 10100 because you grow potatoes in your window box for us, or tomatoes or whatever it is, you also get to be a member of the 10100 for access to things like childcare or the other things that we are trying to offer as services to both the members of the 10100 but also to the community at large. And so any business that we would potentially have a consumer cooperative thing to that, because it'd be very interesting to run sort of like a Sam's Club or what's the other one, Costco type warehouse sort of thing out of here in Owen Sound, where your membership would also give you access to things like, you know, our childcare programs, or, you know, being able to grow food boxes and profit from that. You know, get a fresh, you know, big huge thing of mixed produce, both from your garden, from everybody else's, at the end of the growing season, sort of thing. There, it'd be interesting. Huh. Sorry for that little tirade. Just went off in a little.
If you didn't, I think you were like a pod person, so don't worry about it. Tell me you're still human.
I'm having a little trouble hearing Laura.
Oh, I just said that if he didn't go off on a tirade, I just assumed he was a pod person.
Oh.
Anyway, We'll have to add that little thing in there. Okay, so let me get back to the notes, because I think we've covered some really cool ideas so far. But all I've got written down is talk to developers, re-vacant land to be used for growing produce, and talk to city/owners of the Black Clawson Kennedy site. What else did we talk about?
I think another networking opportunity would be SEMCO, Southeastern Network of Social Enterprise Network of Central Ontario. That's what I'm thinking of.
Okay.
So they are exactly what they sound like, but I learned about them during my social services diploma coursework. So that was one of the not internship, placement opportunities that we were given, was to collaborate with this network, find someone in the community that was working in social enterprise, be mentored by them, see how to investigate how to run that. So Georgian College is connected with them currently.
Yep.
But I don't know who else would be in this in our community.
The Glassworks Cooperative has come up in terms of connections. I have reached out to them, and I hope that someday some of them will join us in this conversation, because there might be some overlap between what they're trying to do in terms of a housing cooperative, and as well as some of the environmental things that they want to accomplish, alongside with what we want to do, which is to empower businesses that are environmentally conscious into coming into being. And to be able to function without having to be, making the owners rich, if that makes any sense. Because the goal of the TEN 100 is ultimately to get to a point where it has like a retirement program, pensions, so that all of us can afford to live after we can't work anymore. Education programs, or even debt buyback programs. So those of us who have been saddled with educational debt, one of the opportunities that our TEN 100 will do is buy back your debt, like debt collection agencies. Only instead of buying the debt from whoever owns it and hounding you for it, we'll cancel it. We'll write it off as the cost of doing business. That's part of the plans of one of the things that I would love for this TEN 100 to be able to offer for its members. And I'm also getting notification that we've got about 7 minutes left. So that's good. I thought I only had about 70 seconds. But we got 7 minutes left before the Zoom call will end. At which point, I'm probably going to restart the meeting and do Humanizing the Economy reading, where hopefully we can get some more discussion and response about the some of the yahoos who have tried doing cooperative startups for worker-owned cooperatives from as long ago as 250 years ago that are still in operation today. So that's exciting. Hopefully we're going to learn a bit about those today. But back to the TEN 100 idea and networking with other people. We've got people at the Artist Co-op as well that we've wanted to connect with and to bring in. So that's on our list of things to do. I was hoping that my friend Sarah Fowler might be joining us today, because I was hoping to be able to chat with her as somebody who has very recently run a business in the Owen Sound area, and we'd get an idea and a sense and feel for what it's like running bricks and mortar on the ground independent small business in an area like Owen Sound. So very interested in conversations like that, because diversity is the key. Having a diverse array of businesses, having the produce business alongside something industrial, alongside something retail, alongside something what is it, construction. I'm not too sure what that particular industry would be, but there's more than enough in terms of work to be done in this area, by virtue of the fact that there always seem to be people working on stuff in this area, from roofing or doing renovations or whatever it is.
What was did you guys see Waleed Aslam? He was given a position for, is it downtown business?
Oh, I saw the headline. I saw the headline, but I didn't get a chance to read through it.
Yeah, I'm just wondering now another person to invite into the conversation, like for expertise, and
100%.
And there, he is also on I think we talked about this group, the newcomers.
Okay.
Grey Bruce newcomers.
Mm-hmm.
There's a position there. Oh, in collaboration with United Way, there's a woman, May Ip, I think is her name. She was hired to do rural business development for women and for immigrant women, I think it was. So again, another person that might have some other connections and resources to help. Or know people that want to get a business started.
I want to know. I wonder if that's the same May that I'm thinking of. That her and her husband ran the Avalon Bar. Maybe before your time.
She's a tiny woman, short hair. She wears glasses, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know it's United Way that I know she's working for right now. But so two people that I think would know others that are looking to.
Lauren, if I could maybe get you to fire those names off to me in a Facebook message or something, and I will follow up with that, because that seems brilliant.
Did we lose Sarah again?
No, we got Sarah, but
Laura.
we did lose Laura. Her internet seemed to be going a little wonky there. Seems to be, it could be Zoom. I'm one of the things, and what I might do in the last 2 minutes here is I might suggest that next week, instead of using Zoom, I might use Google Hangouts, because A, they don't have a time limit, and B, I don't need the record function in Zoom anymore, because I'm streaming directly to YouTube, which is records automatically, which is yay. And so long as everybody is okay with using Google, we'll use Google Hangouts next time. And I'll just post a link on the website, and hopefully we'll never have to worry about being reminded that I only have 1 minute and 43 seconds left in this particular conversation. But in case, I know we're going to be losing Sarah here, so because you're part 2 of the meeting, and you got to get your video loaded. So in case I don't get to remind you later, you are awesome, and I hope you get your video loaded. Oh, excellent. Yeah, you're still sounding like a robot, I feel. There it is. So this is great. I love the fact that we've got some lists of network people to connect with, or people to network with, I should say. The idea of, especially working with people who are landing in the area for the first time and are looking for to start their own businesses. Hey, that's what we do. That's what this whole purpose is to equip people with the power to get up and running. So anyway, we're about to the stream is about to end, so I'm just going to restart the stream here once it does, and when we do, we're back with humanizing the economy, cooperatives in the age of capital. And until then, don't forget, you guys are awesome. Yeah, so please join, or rejoin, I should say. Oops. So I'm just waiting now for people to rejoin the conversation. If we don't get anybody, that's fine. I know where we're going to be picking up. We're picking up with Rochdale, which should be fun. Excellent. Okay. So for those of you who are watching on the YouTube, I just want to remind you again that you are awesome, because you are. And if you've listened along this far, thank you. I appreciate having you. We've got Lauren joining us back. And I'll see if I can get Laura to join us.
Hi.
Hello, Lauren. I'm just seeing if Laura will join us.
Is Laura going to join us?
I'm just going to find out. I'm sure.
Okay, I just realized I only have 10% of my battery left.
Awesome. Oy.
Yeah,
Sorry,
I
I
need
missed.
another.
Sorry, you're saying you got 10% of your phone left and you need
My
to...
phone battery left, and I don't have my plug here.
Right.
So we're just gonna discuss the book, are we?
That's all right. I won't hold you to it. You should definitely preserve your battery life. Having just lost my phone this past weekend, and somebody gave me a loaner phone, God bless them, I am excruciatingly happy that I do have a phone because it sucked when I didn't. So I would highly recommend you preserve your battery.
There's one thing I want to mention to you.
Oh, sure.
Was that just like in terms of everything that is going on in the world right now, especially in terms of being, well, we're both white people. In terms of being an ally, one of the things that has come to light out of this all for me is a sense of needing to normalize a few different behaviors. And not that there's been any issue with this so far, but I'm wondering. Here, I'm coming out of this in a very.
Oh, it's all right. One of the things that I would, yeah.
I think what I want to get at is just in terms of let's be really clear about creating a safe space.
Hmm.
And it doesn't seem like it needs to be set at all.
Yeah.
But I think when we're intentional about that from the beginning, then it can be. Oh, shit, my battery.
That's okay. I think
I'm wondering, like, it's partly just what I'm learning personally. Is like I know I've been more reflective on my own behavior and attitudes lately, and especially like, you know, if there's some conflict, for example, at any point, like I think knowing what to expect and how to address something like that comes up, like how do we want to treat each other? We want to, you know, be frank about these types of things, and like I don't know, sometimes it just requires a bit of a frank chat about it, but it's almost like setting group expectations while we're coming here vulnerable and things are fucked up right now and we all need a little support. And I know like I'm a sensitive person. I think Laura's a sensitive person too, and I can see that you are as well. So yeah, I just want us to be able to talk about that if there's any shit down the road.
100%. The whole philosophy behind fostering a democratic workplace is having a forum for communication and a way of resolving conflicts that involves consensus at best, majority assent at worst, and if we can't get majority assent, then we just shouldn't do it. Is sort of my philosophy. Having sort of like a set of bylaws within the cooperative that sort of spell out what our values are, I'm totally okay with. One of the things I toyed with earlier on was like, if I want to create a democratic and open workplace, and at the same time, I don't want it taken over by a bunch of like, you know, fascist Nazis. How do I get around this, you know? And I thought, you know, just having a requirement of being a membership, being able to sign on to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, being something as simple as that, you know, just affirming your commitment to, you know, stuff like that.
That's why I brought up permaculture, though. Like, sorry, I'm shaking my finger because I'm getting excited.
Yes, the passionate finger wave.
Yes, the permaculture core ethics are care for people, care for the planet, and redistribution of the surplus. Right, and understanding that like even too much surplus is a bad thing, so you gotta store it somewhere.
Yeah, and
who has time for that?
I mean, we've got a scheme where we turn it all into dividend shares and then give the members opportunities to reinvest it in the forms of debt buyback, housing, you know, side businesses, benefit businesses, you name it. Group vacations, that's the one I'm looking forward to. You know?
So one final thought, like with that's what I brought up. I'm just being really wary of, okay, so white allies, having conversations with white allies right now. The one thing that I'm drawing down from that is how much care we have to give each other through work, like stumbling around in the dark, and being able to admit that we don't have the answers, and there being this, like, put the shame, blame, you're ignorant impulse, put that on hold, because it's not helpful to anyone in growing.
True.
Like, even if there's something that, like, it's just really, like, a, I don't know, thorn in my side, like, do you want to create more chaos and, like, sort of exclude someone in your local community, or make sure that there's still a place for that. There's still a place for
Yeah.
everyone in this,
And,
even
and
if they don't agree with us.
and having something like yes, I can sign on to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It's sort of like it's outside of us. You know, it's kind of like a universal standard, and it's almost, or even having like certain expectations of like this is something that happens within our 10100 business. This is something that happens outside, and please don't bring outside things into the business. It's going to happen, and when that does happen, that's why we have 98 other members to help balance it out and to make sure, you know, that no two individuals use the business to turn it into their own private war against each other, which is part of the strength of doing this as a collective action. When my hope and my goal is, by the time we have 10 business ideas up on our list, and we have 100 people supporting those ideas, we will have the frameworks of what will be not our constitution, but that's the best idea. It's the bylaws that everybody will basically agree to, and it will all be ratified by us, because we're going to make this up as we grow organically. So every time we get new people who are interested in joining, their voice becomes a part of what will shape us, and we will create these things. I like the idea right from the get-go, being intentional, of saying, you know, when we have 100 people, it's inevitable that we're going to have conflict. Somebody's toes are going to get stepped on, feelings are going to get hurt. When that happens, this is how we deal with it. And we are by becoming a member, we all agree that this is how we deal with our conflict. And also we agree that this is how we will behave towards other members. This is how we will behave, you know, towards customers. This is how we will, you know, so we can
Principles.
nip some things in the bud, as it were, and also provide a legal framework for us to weed out members who might threaten to bring down the entire enterprise through illegal activity or through just being generally miserable human beings, you know, and because it is true, like bad apples will rot a whole bunch if we're not careful, and I would like to believe and hope that having a democratic workplace with ways of dealing with stuff that most people aren't used to having, I guess, in traditional wage slave jobs, where what the boss says, the boss gets away with, or you lose hours or you get fired or whatever it is. And now I'm beginning to lose my train of thought. Point of the matter is, human beings are weird, and sometimes we do things that are counter to our best interests out of fear, and when fear gets triggered, it would be really nice to have something in place that would limit the amount of drama, which I think is what I hear you kind of wanting to address head on very at the beginning.
And I've experienced it myself, and like, I mean, in retrospect, sometimes I say like, well, how did I play? I mean, you can play that game in your head, right? But just like, I don't like to guess at what's going on in other people's minds. I want to be able to address something.
Yeah.
If it arises, if there's a need to, so that we can.
And I would imagine
drama before it starts getting bigger.
I would imagine there would be tiers of this might be a really good spot, because like within the 10100, it's a cooperative, so the members of the board are made up of members of the cooperative. So the I guess what would be the traditional CEO position is elected from members of the cooperative. And then vice president, all that other great stuff. The different positions can all be elected membership positions. One we could do would be arbiter, and so we could elect from amongst our 100, say 3 different people from 3 different business groups or 3 different businesses that would be people who would be their job to mediate between different members to resolve conflict. And so if there's ever a situation where in a business. For example, there would grow to be two different factions within the business that want to do things two different ways. And they would be somebody from outside that business would then be able to come in and sort of work out through a parliamentary process something that would have that business either work together to a consensus where they all agree to a certain regime for a certain while under a certain manager, or they agree that their different businesses need to do two different things, and so instead of forcing it in one way or another, we split it up into two different businesses and allow the two different factions just to do whatever it is they want to do, and then support them both and hope they turn a surplus. You know, because like,
well, I just love all the. I'm gonna have to let you go soon here. I just I like the other ideas that have been mentioned so far. As well, like you said, Sarah Goldman was thinking thrift store of some sort, or consignment.
Yes, something like that. Yeah.
And I just want to mention that I'm not at all attached to what the urban agriculture could look like. Like, if other people have visions, I want to assure you that my financial piece and my labor are here. So if we went in a totally different direction, I'm happy with that.
Yeah. I just love the idea of turning lawns into producible land. I love the idea of like turning boulevards that could grow fruit trees, you know, plant them with fruit trees, you know, graft. I'm sure you must have seen there's a team of women that are going around grafting in like vines and stuff onto like municipal maple trees and things so that people can grow grapes and things. Yeah. It is really cool. So they just go around.
I forgot that you could do that, actually.
Yeah.
You can do that with apples too.
Yeah, all sorts of and they do with all sorts of different fruits, and their end goal is that people should be able to reach up and grab fruit as they walk. You know, it sounds great. You know, very utopian. I'll take it. And I'm sure the raccoons love it too.
Out.
It's okay, Lauren. You're awesome.
I've got 4.
That's
all
okay.
Right.
We'll chat with you next week, maybe. Yes.
Yeah.
Excellent. Take care.
Bye.
And with that idea, we're going to humanize the economy. Make sure. There we go. There we are. Humanizing the Economy. Cooperatives in the Age of Capital by John Rastakis. This is Chapter 2, I believe. Yep, Chapter 2, The Materialization of Dreams. Part 2, Rochdale. As so often happens, the ultimate realization of Owen's vision came in a form that he would not have predicted. The first successful market-based cooperatives did not even receive Owen's support. He rejected the commercial basis of the cooperatives, arguing that societies were, quote, not the social system we envisaged. His ideological opposition to private ownership in favor of a, quote, pure cooperative model based solely on communitarian principles blinded him from perceiving how cooperation could succeed in another form. The breakthrough success of the cooperative model came in the form of a cooperative business, not a cooperative community. It was given impetus through the work of Dr. William King, a crucial transitional figure who bridged the cooperative idea of both Owen and Thompson with the pragmatic task of making these ideals plausible in the real world of the marketplace. King had his own ideas about how a cooperative community should function, and his greatest contributions was in applying his considerable talents of practicality and realism to the task at hand. William King was born in Yorkshire in 1786, the son of a vicar. Unlike Owen, who was largely self-taught, King was a distinguished academic who studied political economy, moral philosophy, and modern history at Cambridge, and then became a doctor and a fellow at the Royal College of Physicians. He settled in Brighton and gained valuable experience as a doctor ministering to the poor, but he went from doing charity work to organizing a friendly society that he hoped would eventually allow the poor to do without charity and to meet their own needs through mutual insurance. Friendly societies were at this time among the most important creations of the working class communities, using mutual aid to provide for their members in times of sickness or other hard times. One of their key functions was to cover the cost of burials. King believed in the ultimate aim of a cooperative community, building its own homes on its own land and employing its own members in productive work. But unlike Owen, who had said a community might build a store, but a store need never build a community, King was a gradualist. He believed it was better to begin small, to accumulate modest victories, than not to begin at all. He perceived that the working class would have to do this work by themselves and set about instructing them. He started a monthly publication, The Cooperator, which sold at a penny and reached a circulation of 12,000 copies. In the pages of The Cooperator, King provided a systemic exploration of the cooperative philosophy and some realistic advice on how to set up and run a cooperative shop. The magazine became the textbook of a new movement. In working out his cooperative philosophy, King responded directly to the dominant ideas of his time. Like Adam Smith, he accepted that in the original state of things, the whole produce of the labor belongs to the laborer. Unlike Smith, however, he did not accept that the growth of landlords and masters is inevitable, and that in a market society a laborer must get only a fraction of the value of his labor in the form of wages. He saw clearly that wages were determined not by the value of the product, but rather by the ruthless play of competition between capitalists. Moreover, workers were trapped by the logic of a market in which they functioned as mere appendages to the machines they ran. Eventually, through overproduction, these same machines would put them out of work altogether. How can the worker break out of this trap? First, King proposed that without labor, capital is nothing. Capital is really only stored labor and has no utility until the worker makes use of it. But workers are prevented from taking all the value of their product because they remain dependent. While they are working to produce goods, they must also live. The capitalist merely advances capital in order to keep workers alive. However, if the worker has enough capital to do this, then the value of the product would all go to the worker. The key for King was that workers to store up enough capital to gain control over their own labor. They must also generate enough of the surplus to be able to invest in their own enterprise. Possessing both labor and capital, the workers can then do away with the capitalists altogether. But cooperation is essential to this. Individual workers cannot do this on their own. There is too much risk, their condition far too fragile, and the time required to accumulate sufficient capital takes too long. It is crucial, therefore, that workers learn to share their risk by cooperating to pool their capital. How to start? King advocated in the establishment of a shop. Since people have to go to a shop every day to buy food and necessities, why not go to one that they owned? The surplus from the cooperative shop would then go towards building the cooperative community that is the ultimate aim. Ever the pragmatist, King proposed that capital be accumulated partly through weekly subscriptions, as in the friendly societies, and partly through the surplus generated from running the shop. Work can then be found for other members until all are employed. Finally, the co-op can afford to pay sickness benefits, pensions, and schooling for the children. It can purchase land, build housing, and keep unemployed workers in employment growing food. Eventually, a whole new society within society will emerge independent of both capitalists and welfare. The Owenite vision of the cooperative community is thus achieved gradually, and from the patient accumulation of capital that comes from using the market in the interests of the workers. King's great achievement was not merely to present a vision of the future. At this time there was a surplus of utopian visions to choose from, but much more importantly, a way to translate this vision into reality. What was needed to make such a plan work?
Unromantically, and at the most basic level, there was a need for rules on how much or how such a cooperative shop should be run. No credit, the selection of 3 people to act as trustees, a weekly accounting of the business, acceptance of members as only accepted as members only people that can be trusted, and the very wise advice that meetings be held in a room, not a pub. Otherwise, members will be tempted to drink the surpluses before they are earned. On this basis, save the last, their directors showed remarkable restraint. Wood meeting in the committee room of the Weavers' Arms. Weavers' Arms, I should say. A group of weavers and cobblers in the industrial town of Rochdale created the seed from which the modern cooperative movement would grow. It was on account of King's practical and sage advice that the proper manner of running a cooperative business, especially on the importance of carefully limiting credit and dividend system based on the amount of business that a member conducted within the co-op, that a Rochdale store succeeded where so many others had failed. Much has been written about Rochdale, and that name is now acquired a semi-mythical status in the cooperative corpus. All movements need their symbols, and the Rochdale is one. But it marks a milestone in the movement for economic democracy because the Rochdale story shifts the focus from the creation of socialized communities as the means to reform society to transform the market, to the transformation of market relations in service of social ends. With the guidance of King's rules for cooperation, Rochdale helped transform economics by formalizing reciprocity as an economic principle. When it proved successful, the model became the blueprint for the largest and most durable and most successful mass movement for economic reform in history. It was here that the modern conception of the cooperative as democratically controlled enterprise took form. In the beginnings, its beginnings were memorably and very humorously recorded by George Jacob Holyoake. At the close of the year 1843, on one of those damp, dark, dense, dismal, disagreeable days which no Frenchman can be got to admire, such days as occur towards November, when the daylight is all used up and the sun has given up on all attempt at shining, either in disgust or despair, a few poor weavers out of employ and nearly out of food and quite out of heart with the social state met together to discover what they could do to better their industrial condition. Manufacturers had capital and shopkeepers had advantage of stock. How could they succeed without either? Should they avail themselves of the poor law, that were dependents of emigration, that they seemed like transportation for the crime of having to be born poor? What should they do? They would commence on the battle of life on their own account. They would, as far as they were concerned, supersede tradesmen and mill owners and capitalists. Without experience or knowledge or funds, they would turn merchants and manufacturers. And it was so. Was. The small shop, stocked with a tiny inventory of butter, flour, oatmeal, sugar, and a few candles, opened just before Christmas on December 21st, 1844, for 2 days a week. It had a founding capital of £28 sterling collected from its members on a subscription of 2 pence a week. It took the 28 founding members 4 months to pool the money. But despite these humble beginnings, there was no dampening of the reformist fervor of the Society's founders. Included in the charter, along with the members of the mission to open the shop and to build the homes, was the following modest aim, quote, that as soon as practical, this society shall proceed to arrange the powers of production, distribution, education, and government, or, in other words, to establish a self-supporting home colony of united interests and assist other societies in establishing such colonies. Not to neglect the moral side of things, the proposal followed that, quote, that for promotion of sobriety, a temperance hotel be opened in one of the Society's houses as soon as convenient. It was a grand vision, founded on 2 pence subscription. And while the rearrangement of the national means of production and distribution and government had to wait a while longer, 10 years later, the British cooperative movement had grown to nearly 1,000 cooperatives. The original shop still stands preserved as a museum at 31 Todd Lane. Toad Lane. Whatever. Located on the boundary of Lancashire and Yorkshire, Rochdale had a long history of activism and labour unrest. It was a tough political town. In 1808, a bitter strike resulted in the stationing of regular troops in town, which remained there until 1846. In particular, Rochdale hand-loom weavers were a highly politicized group, born troublemakers that could be counted on to lead strikes and be key activists in organizing the community. Reform meetings often attracted 10,000 or more people. Rochdale woolen and cotton industries brought it within the influence of other textile districts like the West Riding of Yorkshire and Southeast Lancashire, both areas of social unrest and seedbeds of various reform movements. The strategic importance of Rochdale was attested by the fact that a major effort to organize a national trade union took place here, and the town played a central role in both the Chartist movement and the 10 Hours movement. The town became an important center for the Owenite activity. In the midst of the tumultuous reform atmosphere, there were concerted attempts at cooperation. The 1840s were a grim time, and Rochdale economic depression had hit the weaving town particularly hard. Hunger and privation among workers and their families left them vulnerable to disease, and of those hardest hit, 5/6 had scarcely any blankets to keep themselves warm, while over 100 families had no blankets at all. Starvation was in the air. In 1837, for example, an average of 180 animals were killed weekly to provide for the town's food needs. In 1841, this number down to 65, a reduction of caloric intake of nearly 60%. The conditions of most weavers from the 1820s to the 1840s and beyond were commonly referred to as indescribable, but described they were. Here is an account from the evidence gathered by the Select Committee of Emigration in 1827 of conditions in Lancashire, where in the space of 20 years industrialization had driven weavers from relative prosperity to the edge of starvation. Quote, Mrs. Hutton and myself, in visiting the poor, were asked by a person almost starving to go into a house. We there found on one side of the fire a very old man, apparently dying, on the other side a young man, about 18, with a child on his knee, whose mother had just died and been buried. We were going away from that house when the woman said, Sir, you have not seen all. We went upstairs, and under some rags we found another young man in the widower, and on turning down the rags we were unable to remove himself. We found another man who was dying, and who did die in the course of the day. I have no doubt that that family were actually starving at the time. End quote. In Rochdale, the economic backdrop of the crisis was the crumbling of the town's industrial heart. The new factory system had turned once proud and independent artisans into dependent outworkers for large manufacturers. Employers succeeded in ratcheting down wages while simultaneously defeating attempts to introduce minimum wage. By the 1840s, automation was putting handloomers out of business, and the industries of cotton and manufacturing and machine making were supplied by imported cheap labor composed mostly of desperate Irish workers fleeing famine back home only to face the hatred of local townsfolk. The hat industry that used the felt produced in the town was in decline. Making matters worse, the cotton factories had to compete with imported cloth produced at a fraction of the cost with slave labor in the United States. Globalization then, as now, was linking the fates of workers half the world apart. These then were the material conditions that immediately preceded the establishment of the Rochdale Society of Equitable Pioneers in 1844. But the factors that gave rise to the cooperative movement at this time and in this place extend far beyond immediate economic hardship. The deeper roots of the movement arose from the human qualities that made up the unique character of the weaver communities from which it sprang. Understanding this is the more than a simple appreciation of historical conditions. It goes to the heart of what gave the cooperative movement its galvanizing power during the latter part of the 1800s and its continuing relevance to the conditions of globalizing capital today. Weavers that led the Lancashire radicalism of 1816 to 1820 were a part of the clash between two conflicting ideologies and ways of life. One was the rising swell of industrial laissez-faire capitalism, which we have already described. The other was the disappearance of an ancient way of life that was characterized by the artisan tradition and the weaver communities this tradition had woven, a deep social egalitarianism, a spirit of independence, an immense pride in personal skill, and a profound interdependent community life in which fate's fortunes were shared by all in good times and bad. The suffering of the weavers that resulted from the rise of industrial exploration were those of the whole community. The deliberate erosion of trade union protections by the state, the loss of status and of self-worth that came with the de-skilling and factory production, and the flood of unskilled labor that employers used to depress wages gave their resistance a particularly moral force. The Owenite frame in which they voiced their protest appealed to essentially rights and elementary notions of human fellowship rather than merely economic or sectarian interests. They demanded betterment as a whole community, and Owen's ideas provided them with the framework that would at one stroke recast the social architecture along lines that they already recognized. Their dreams, which also incorporated the political demands of Chartism, land reform, and free trade unions, were centered on protection of human dignity. They envisioned a mutually supportive community of independent small producers exchanging their products without the manipulations of middlemen, free of the control of masters. At its heart, this is still the vision that speaks to the aspirations of millions caught in the exploitative web of capitalism today. It is very simply a vision that asserts primacy of human and social values over those of commerce. And it was precisely these values that were unraveling as industrial capital consolidated its control in the middle decades of the 19th century. Any thoughts?
How's everybody going?
Yeah.
Short one with
No. Typical, hour and a half. Yeah, it's streaming. Alright. So, I have some thoughts in all of that. Today we read about the Rochdale community and how they started with a society of friends, 28 people bringing 28, what do they call it? Where was it? Yeah, 28 pounds sterling. 28 founding members collected 28 pounds sterling from 2 pence a week. We're trying to collect $100 a month from 100 people to create a pool of capital from which we will sequentially plant the businesses that we all agree to start. We're the pool of labor, we're the entrepreneurs. We are the investors, we're the owners. We get to share in the surplus. And when the time comes and we've got surpluses to share, we get to turn around and reinvest that by buying up our debts and writing them off. I love that idea. I love the idea of creating a workplace that gives us the time and the freedom to get the work that needs to be done, but on our own schedule.
for businesses that allow for that. Obviously, if we're doing a retail store, we got to be open certain hours, and we got to have people that'll work those hours. So the good news is, and sorry, I just had a bunny trail thought. But the good news is, this whole setup is to create a pool of laborers from which businesses can pull from. And if there's jobs to be done, apply for them, work for them. Each business will, of course, have their members that are dedicated to those businesses. They'll be the first lines of people that will gain access to hours that business will offer. The manager, of course, elected by amongst the workers of that particular business, will be the one responsible for posting the hours. And people will apply for shifts. Shifts will be awarded based on, I want to say, my gut instinct is to say seniority. So if you've worked hours in that particular business, then you get more seniority in choosing your hours. Seems to me that seems particularly fair. I'm open to debate on that. I'm sure there are different thoughts on the matter. And it does potentially run the risk of creating a clique of people, which always has the potential of becoming toxic. I believe anytime you can create a power dynamic where some people are in control and are able to create an exclusionary system that benefits the clique as opposed to the whole, that's where we get toxicity. That's where we get different tiers of struggle, of control. And we're trying to avoid that with the TEN 100. We avoid that by electing the managers. So the people who are going to be setting the hours for the business, the people who are going to be responsible for kind of setting the tone of the business, really. If there's a retail situation, ultimately the manager is going to be the person who either sets the tone, the ambiance, the environment, or will work with members of the you know what, that's actually a good question. Should the manager be allowed to set the tone? Should that be one of the perks of being the manager? Or is that something that should be, they, by virtue of being the manager, then become sort of like the head of the, like a committee, who then implements what the members want? That would be incredibly more democratic. Very counterintuitive to the way our society's been set up. Might be intriguing. Something for the discussion we'll have next week. I'll be sure to remember to bring it up. If you have been watching this and have some thoughts, I would encourage you to leave it. Leave your questions and or thoughts in the comments on the stream. And hopefully I will, one of these days, go through and see if anybody has actually left a question. And hopefully I'll be able to answer it. Lord knows I do enjoy wrestling with these questions. And even if I don't have an answer, I would love to have a discussion. Because that's how we discover the answers. And discover solutions to some of these problems. Either way, I believe we've been doing this for about an hour and a half now. My throat is beginning to become a little parched. It is getting particularly hot during the summer. So I would just like to leave it here. I would like to remind everybody that they are awesome, especially if you've stayed with us for the length and duration of the conversation. I look forward to having more conversations as we go forward, and hopefully we'll be able to build something that gives back to our community. Have a great day, everyone.